So this session is going to be very different than if you have been to any of the others that I have done. I've done some tech studies, some panels, talking about just my story. Very much the biggest difference is up to now, I've given a few sessions and they've all been in my voice. Now I want in my voice give you a session about the voice of others. There's a lot going on about the media, from people claiming fake news on both sides, to people being out certain media outlets are amazing, certain are bad. It's usually really hard to do when I come from an academic perspective, for example. I am a student still. And I think a lot about if you want to be able to have a real case study, and you need to control all the variables, and it's really hard to compare two media networks when you got to find the exact story and think about, are they talking about the exact same story? I've had the opportunity in the last few months, last 15 months to be exact, to work with literally every major news network in the United States and beyond. And they were all trying to tell the same story, so to speak, in their own language, their own way. So what I want to do is go through certain parts of them. I'm going to try for most part of it to show either there's going to be in the presentation itself, it's just clips, then I'm going to move over online and show some news articles. What I would do is I would just want to show what we did. I would tell my experience working on that specific project, who the journalists were, who the network was, how they approached certain topics of it. I intentionally wrote how does the story present, how does the media present the story of transitions, pun intended. And then I would love to have a discussion. I would love to get the reflections of all of you. How do you see it? I want this session as much possible to be about everyone else's voice besides mine, what I have to say right now. Meaning, what we're going to see here, there's going to be a lot of it in my voice, of what I've said in the past. And specifically, I would love to have a conversation. I would love to have a discussion. What do we think about the media? Are they good? Are they bad? Which specific media networks would you prefer? Tell me comments. If you really think I said something that's totally stupid, you can let me know. Let's see. Let's go on a journey. I want to take a journey together with all of you and start. In the beginning, I'm going to have a few different clips. While we're showing the clips, I'm going to have Miriam doing me a favor and turning the lights off. If possible, we can all at least be really quiet while clips are playing so we can really pay attention. I will give background, context before and after for every clip. Then when we're done with the digital part, we'll have a conversation. Then we'll move on to print media and see. I can go literally for a whole day right now, just showing stuff online. We'll see how much time you have.
Excuse me?
Yeah.
Sorry to interrupt you. I didn't have the pleasure of going to the prior sessions. Would it be okay to ask you if you could just talk to us for a few minutes and tell us a little bit about who you are before we see what other people think you are?
Ditto. I will do
if
that.
That's not okay. It's fine.
No, I will do that.
Thank you.
But I want to focus here on how does it look online, how does it look in the media, and less in my voice. So this is what happens. I promise you I don't do it that often when I Google myself. So you get the basic results, which are fairly obvious. Facebook page, this is my blog, called The Second Transition. I was unaware. I've seen all of these. You can even see if you want, because it's my computer, you can even see when I visited some of these pages. Anyway, let's go here. I guess this will give you a basic background of the story which I've said. I won't want to repeat it because I've said it too many times to some people. So here's the basic background. American transgender activist, blogger, speaker. I have no idea who wrote this, but I did a bad job. So the first openly transgender woman from a Hasidic community, direct descendant of Hasidic Judaism, founded the Baal Shem Tov. This, by the way, is a part that I want to focus a lot, because you will see that almost every media network played this up. I never did. In some of these interviews, I didn't even mention it. And they would still, for some reason, and we'll see how much we get to it, they all felt the need to play up the part. Descendant of Judaism's founder, a few other details. So that's the basic story.
what is the part they're playing of the fact they're from a Hasidic?
Not just Hasidic background, but specifically descendant of Hasidic Judaism's founder, the Baal Shem Tov. Which I'm a descendant 5 lines, 5 times. Someone even added this later.
What?
Lineage.
Yeah.
So they're more interested in the fact that you're a Jewish background than...
I mean, not just Jewish. It's playing up, and we're going to get to in a minute when I show the certain clips. I never made a big deal out of it. I might mention it. You will see in certain clips I would mention it. It's part of who I am. But specifically the print media, in some way more than the digital media, love to make a big deal out of it. And a big part of what I want to discuss today is also how the media loves to make sensational as much as they can. Some, that's all they do. Some do it in a more passive-aggressive way. Everyone has their own way of doing it. And I get it. They all want a great headline. That's what gets them hits. That's what gets them money. I get it. But I wanna have this conversation. I don't want to talk a lot about my own feelings right now. I just want to have a conversation about it and see where we are. So here's what the first part is going to be digital media. I'm going to focus on 5 different parts. The first one is going to be a Showtime TV show. It's called Darknet. It's a Showtime reality series. They reached out to me before I came out, before the transition. They reached out to me in the summer of 2015 saying that they're developing a show and they would want to have me on it. The show started airing in January of 2016. And this specific episode, it was the last episode of season 1, which was episode 8, aired in March of 2016. And we'll get into details in a minute. This is in some ways a very interesting clip, because when this was filmed, while I was already in the process of transition, they didn't know it. And I was convinced at that point that by the time this is going to air, I would still be in the closet, so it wouldn't really affect. By the end, that changed. That came out in November, right after we finished filming this. And we'll get in a minute when we watch it, we'll see how they dealt with that. The next one, and it's one of the only media projects that I can say that I regret doing, was a short clip that I did with Fox News. Fox News has a short media company called Chasing News, and it was filmed and aired in November 2015, right after I came out. We'll get to watch it, and you all get to see for yourself what Fox News is. The next one was CNN, probably my most favorite short video project that I've done. Also filmed in November 2015. They took some time editing it, aired in December 2015. Did actually a really good job. The next is Vocative, but it's kind of Vocative Showtime, and this is going to relate a lot to the Showtime TV series. There was a kind of a follow-up that they did. Filmed parts in September 2015, January 2016, aired the same time as the episode in March of 2016. The last one is the least popular, and it was done by a friend of mine for Concordia News. Concordia is a university in Montreal. A really, really great clip, but wasn't published widely. It was only released on YouTube. Filmed in March of 2016 while I was in Montreal, aired in May of 2016. This is, yeah, you can get the likes, thank you. This is the Darknet episodes. The show was called Darknet. It's a Showtime TV series. The concept of the show was exploring different versions of the internet that are not surface level. So cultural and different forms of how people relate to the internet. This specific episode has 3 different stories. They have a story of someone who is selling weapons online, 3D printed weapons online, a story of someone recording police brutality, and my story. It's half an hour, so you're not going to watch the whole thing. I'm just going to skip through the parts where they film me. Then, once I finish filming that, I would love to get some comments from the audience, and then about what you think about this, not about me. Tell me what you think about the episode, forget about me, I'm not here. And then I will give my own reflections and continue.
The second you start asking questions, you start making calls. The way they keep you is by keeping you ignorant. I got to a point where I was like, I can't anymore. I found my way to the internet.
Life as you know it is over.
always, since I remember, I would have this like idea in my head that, who said so? How do we know that? I never accepted the blind faith part. Could be that's my problem, but it just never worked for me.
He was born with the name Yisrael Abraham Stein. Now, a 23-year-old sophomore at Columbia University, he goes by Abby.
My father is the 10th generation of the founder of the Hasidic movement. Both of my grandfathers had their own synagogues. There was some kind of unsaid expectation that I would end up being a rabbi because of the track that I took growing up.
Abby was born and raised in Williamsburg, a Brooklyn neighborhood known for its young, artsy scene. But alongside the hipsters, there's an enclave for Hasidic Jews, where Hebrew and Yiddish are the languages on the street. The dress code is straight out of Old World Europe, and much of modern culture is shunned.
Growing up, I didn't know we are different. I believed that most of the world is Jews and most of the Jews are ultra-Orthodox. This idea of like, we have to be separated. Don't speak English, don't use it, only speak Yiddish. It's me pretending to pray when I was 2. 90% of the times I was a good kid and follow everything, but in my mind, I would question everything. The idea of souls, the origins of the Bible, the origins of different laws in Judaism. And that's something that is not allowed and not accepted at all. I had a lot of anxiety because of the questions. I was afraid the answers are gonna be not the answers that will fit in with the community life. And it's like what it's expecting of everyone in the community, and it's pretty obvious. Like, you never even question it, that you get 17, 18, and then you get married, and you don't use birth control, so you just start having a lot of kids. People expect that, and this is what happens. Around the time after my wedding, I started questioning everything again. Is there a God? This question drove me crazy because I felt like no one is asking this question, so something is wrong with me, I'm crazy. I knew a friend of mine who had told me before he had a tablet. I asked him if I can borrow the tablet for a few days. Okay. I found a public bathroom in a shopping center that had internet, and I just started sitting there for days.
Imagine going online for the first time. 82 million videos, 100 million gigs of data, 60 trillion pages.
I remember the second day that I was on the internet, I found this Israeli YouTube channel. They have like basic intros to evolution, to the Big Bang, to biology, to like almost everything alive that you can imagine. The whole idea, the whole concept was totally shook me. And I had email exchanges with different people who were very religious. And I remember asking them at some point, can you convince me that there's a God, yes or no, without blind faith and without telling me that you can't understand God? And the answer was no. And this is where I made my final, when I came finally to like, I'm done.
At age 20, Abby left his community and started over. Unsure of how to dress in the secular world or speak English, he'd revolted against the only life he'd ever known.
We got separated in May or June of 2013. And the official divorce was a few months after. We had a kid together. We had a son. Not being with my son every day was the hardest part for a long time. What am I going to do now? Where am I going to? Everything collapsed. It was a lot of hard steps, terribly hard steps. Going online literally saved my life. People commune, people find each other, and you can be a heretic together with someone else. For me, mainly what it told me is that I'm not crazy. I think I was part of a big revolution. There was always kids who didn't fit into the box. So I slowly started reading more of the liberal Jewish philosophy and come to the point where I'm like, yeah, Judaism is man-made, and that's beautiful.
Abby still recites the old prayers, but he's traded Hasidism for a Jewish renewal temple on Manhattan's Upper West Side.
Some people call it the hippie synagogue, and that's what I like about it. The energy, the environment, it's people dancing and jumping. It pretty much changed my life to the better. Right now, I feel like I'm basically living the dream.
Before I show this part, whatever, yeah, leave it off for now. Yeah, I'm gonna show this part in a second. So, it's fairly evident in the video. I was in a really weird stage when this was filmed. As I mentioned, it was filmed in September of 2015. I was in the really early stages of actual transition. They didn't know it, which personally made me really conflicted. And they filmed the second part of it this October of 2015, which was the part where also they zoomed into my eyes, which for me it was shocking to see there was already changes happening. And they aired it in March of 2016. Let me show this part and then we'll take before I continue, I want to see if anyone has any comments, any observations. There's obviously something going on here with a mix of names, pronouns, old names, new names, final parts. It's an interesting part. I will share in a minute the experience that I had working with and trying to figure out a way of dealing with it. But if there's any comments, I would love to take that. I want to hear some fresh eyes before I go into it. I wouldn't take that many. There'll be more time for Q&A at the end. I just want to get two or three comments. Yeah, Mira.
So I guess my question is, if they didn't, I mean, this was before you were out as transitioning in gender terms, I guess. So was their point of interviewing you, or was their question or kind of their goal as the media as just a person who left the Hasidic community? That was the goal?
Yeah.
And that was kind of where you were coming from?
The goal was specifically technology within the Hasidic community, which is the topic of this TV show. It's Darknet, it's about the internet and how internet affects different communities. That was their goal, yeah.
So they didn't know it had anything to do with gender?
Not in the beginning. By the time it aired, by the time they did the editing, they did know, but not while it was filmed, not while it was initially produced. Yeah.
Just in terms of time frame, when did you, in terms of dates, when did you leave your wife and child?
Okay.
When did you all of a sudden, because from what I'm picking up, it's all about going, in quotes, off the derech, and has nothing initially to do with transitioning gender-wise. So if you could just give those.
Yeah, leaving was a long process. It doesn't happen from one day to the other. If I have to put some brackets that happened, during this time, I joined Footsteps, which is an organization helping people who are leaving, in May of 2012. I got separated in spring of 2013, divorced a few months after that. I would say if I have to put a date of finally leaving, it was around the fall of 2013. By the time this was filmed, I was already on hormones for transition, but they didn't know it. This was filmed in September, so I started hormone therapy in September. This was filmed 2 weeks after I started, September 2015. They filmed another short part in October of 2015, and then it was aired, and I came out November 2015, fully public, and this aired in March of 2016.
Can you give us a sense of when the whole transition, gender transition?
I don't want to get into that too much. I've mentioned that at a few different sessions already here. To me, it's an identity that I always had. It's a longer story, and I wish I would be able to talk about it more, but I want to focus here more on the media part. Yeah.
So one thing that struck me about the presentation is that you sort of realize by the end that they're telling a story that they know isn't true, right? In some sense, there's a story and their motivations and they're laid out, and then they're like, just kidding. There's actually some other piece that we didn't tell you about, that really the protagonist wasn't telling you about, and have fun figuring out what's going on, which is sort of an interesting place to be.
Great way to continue. So here are some, not that variable side, but that was the of the presentation. But here are some of my thoughts. So they were the first ones to point out, or more important, I pointed it out, but to put it in and make a deal of it, the part that I sent of the Baal Shem Tov. ever since every major network played it up and centralized it. The name conclusions, the name confusion. So they start out, they clearly use male pronouns. They start out by mentioning my old original name, whatever the name I was born with. But then throughout the video, they use Abby, which is the name that I started using openly since transition. So the reason what happened is this was filmed in September of 2015, as I mentioned, as I started HRT, which is hormone replacement therapy. At that point, I wasn't planning to come out until May. So they filmed it and narrated it in my old disguise, as I call it. Later, when I came out and I started reaching out to them, and I'm like, here's the issue, here's what's going on. My story was already becoming public. It was very evident that by the time this is going to air in March, there's already going to be other clips out about the transition, and I'm like, how do we deal with that? I told them that if it's up to me, they should use she, her pronouns, they should use my new name. For whichever reason, they refused. They agreed to use my real name, they agreed to use Abby, but insisted on using old pronouns. Why they did it, I can speculate, but all I got was, no, the executive producer said be sticking with these pronouns. In addition to that, I offered to do a follow-up. And in two forms. The first one was, they were like, we'll add this mention at the end of the film. So in big part, like as you said, they didn't even want to put it in, not even that. I almost forced them to do it. I'm like, I don't want something to air right now that just has this part. It's not really the full story. I want you to add something. In addition, they offered to film a follow-up, which was only published online, but it went together at the same time, like on their website, on Showtime's website. There was a link to this clip where they were like, this is going to be just the new transition. However, as I'm going to play this clip in a minute, when you see as it starts out, they still insisted, intentionally, when I asked them after that, to start the first minute of the follow-up clip using old footage that they didn't put into the original episode. But it started out the footage that was filmed in September, then they move on to other footage that was filmed in January of 2016.
My father is the 10th generation of the founder of the Hasidic movement. It was a very sheltered community. There was no access to internet, TV, movies. I found a public bathroom in a shopping center that had internet, and I just started sitting there for days. The way they keep you is by keeping you ignorant. I always felt that I am a girl. I just didn't know how to deal with that. And the community that I come from, trans people don't exist. It just didn't exist. No one ever mentioned it. I would pray very heavily to God, hope that I'm gonna just go to sleep and wake up the next day as a girl. I basically followed the very traditional path of, I guess, manhood within the Hasidic community. I got married when I was 18, and I had a son a year after we got married. In the beginning, I was still living in the community. When I opened my first Facebook account under a female persona, I was still married. Talking to people online was really helpful. Before I started hormones, I started a new blog called The Second Transition. I posted my coming out post, and more people started reaching out. And I actually started a support group first on Facebook for people who come from an Orthodox background. That would have never happened without the internet and social media.
Before I continue, if there's any questions, I'll take 2 or 3. Yeah.
I don't know if you want or can answer this question. Would you have left the Hasidic community if not the other transition?
I don't mind answering it. It's hard for me. I can't. I had someone here asking me at a conference yesterday if I could have chosen any Jewish denomination to be born into, which one would I choose? And I'm like, I don't know. It's like the same question if you could choose any country to be born in, if you could choose any decade. It's true for everyone. We are the sum of our experiences. We are the sum of our backgrounds. I wouldn't be where I am today. I'm fairly certain, for example, that I would have never ended up not even at Columbia if not for my background, for whichever different reasons it is. It's hard for me to know and almost impossible for me to know. To some extent, I could say the reason why I left wasn't necessarily because of gender. It was because of philosophical and ideological concerns that I had with the society, with the society where I grew up in, which were indeed caused by gender dysphoria. The reason why I even started reading philosophy as a teenager, which is something that not only people don't do it, you're not supposed to do it in the Hasidic community. You're not supposed to touch philosophy, at least officially. So there was definitely the part where gender triggered a lot of the reasons that end up leading to my leaving the community. There's a very strong chance that without the gender issue, it might have taken a bit longer, but I do believe that at some point I would have encountered philosophy, I would have encountered biblical criticism, and I would have started having an issue with the lack of education in the Hasidic community, and I would have had an issue with sexual abuse and so on that's going on in the community. Most likely, it would have been when I was a lot older with a whole family of kids and maybe grandkids. So it's a combination of both. It's hard. I can't point. I can't really. There's no point in answer to that. Okay, yeah.
I think interesting about this is it feels like the hero of this story is actually the internet. It's not.
That was their point.
And
brilliant observation.
What at least the question is so how come everybody else, the internet? I mean, there must be other people who get touched by the internet who don't go through the transition.
A lot of people get touched by the internet do end up leaving, and that's a big reason why there are more people leaving now than it was 20 years ago, because of the internet. But their goal of this story, because there was a follow-up to a TV show named Darknet, which was about the internet, they still wanted to make this as part of the internet. Yeah, I think one more time.
I was just curious that it's my understanding that in the Satmar community, especially
just one correction, and you're not the only one making this mistake. Every journalist almost that I spoke with, and since that I grew up in Satmar, and they would write that even if I tell them no, I didn't. I wasn't raised in Satmar. I was raised in a community that's named Vishnitz. I understand when you look from the outside, there's no big differences between them. And besides, when it comes to Israel, there's actually a big difference. Satmar is very anti-Israel. Vishnitz is fairly. I mean, they're anti the state of Israel currently because it's a secular state, but they, for example, have their own representative in the Knesset. So they are. That's the part where they are fairly different. But for some reason, American journalists just like to assume that every American Hasidic Jew who wears a black hat is Satmar.
So I got that from
the
media.
Okay.
That's where I didn't make the assumption myself. But my understanding is that the education for boys is very low from a secular perspective. That you only get really up to an 8th grade secular education. How are you able to get into Columbia University with such minimal secular education?
So first, as an answer, I wanna point you to someone who might be able to help you with that a lot better. There's my friend here, Naftali, who started an organization called YAFET, which stands for Young Advocates for Fair Education, which they work really hard to try to change that. Try to do, and it's really hard because no one in the political sphere, no one in the Department of Education or in the government really wants to start a fight with the Hasidic community. It's a complicated topic, and I believe we'd love to tell you more about it later. Personally, for me, I worked hard. It took me 3 years since I started getting an education until I just got a high school diploma.
So you had to go for a GED?
I had to go for a GED, get my high school diploma. Although in some way Columbia was okay with my yeshiva high school diploma, but I would never have survived at Columbia without getting a normal education. So I had to go. I did several different programs, starting in Rockland County at Rockland Community College, and then in New York City. I worked really hard. I always joke, if I would work as hard as I worked to get into Columbia, I work as hard now when I am at Columbia, I would have a perfect 4.3 GPA. I worked, and it's with everyone. I would say everyone who grew up in a Hasidic community and ends up in college works really, really hard. Okay.
Yeah, question.
Okay, we'll do more questions later. I kind of wanna, I wanna at least finish the digital part, which I'm not sure we'll get to. So just one other part, reflection that I have on this is my biggest issue with this follow-up video was, why do you insist to literally reuse old footage? As you all saw, some of the footage in this follow-up is the exact same as they used in the original video. Some is old footage that wasn't in the original episode. But for some reason they insisted on it, and I do know why, because that way the video has both sides. It's a lot more interesting, it's a lot more controversial, and they probably got a lot more views on it because of that. So now I want to move on. Let's do a class in comparative journalism. These are two clips that I did about the same time. They were both filmed in November. The Chasing News Zone, which is Fox News, was aired in November, the other one in December. I'm going to get in a minute after this and give you my experience working with different journalists, with different networks, and how they approached it. But I'm going to let all of you just see the stark difference on the way they present the story. One logistical difference also is the Chasing a News one was more aired in a studio, and there's a discussion happening around the footage in the studio as they film it, more like on a TV news network. Great Big Story is CNN's response, so to speak, to BuzzFeed. So like they're trying to get short clips, they get a lot of millions of views on Facebook and so on. That's their goal with it. So it's they do have a slight different goal in who they are trying to reach, but you see they're very similar structures, and they are both short clips, I think it's 3 to 5 minutes. And yeah, let's watch both of them and get talk.
There's been a lot in the news recently about how hard it is to leave the Hasidic community in Brooklyn. We saw the recent suicide of a girl who wasn't accepted by her family after she left, as well as the problems that girls are having getting education in the Hasidic community. Well, now there is a woman who is inspiring hope in those who would like a different life outside of the Hasidic community. Now, I went to meet Abby Stein. Up until several months ago, most people knew her as Surly Stein, a young man and father who is a descendant of a royal rabbinic heritage.
I joke a lot that I feel like I'm going to be the first ultra-Orthodox ordained female rabbi.
Now, I met her in an Upper West Side apartment where she was learning to do her makeup for the...
Second, that was a lie. She knew it was a lie. She said that I put on the makeup for the first time. She knew it was a lie. She still said it. The reason why now I'm finally transitioning is because I reached a point where I couldn't anymore. I tried everything else, and I had to do that.
You couldn't anymore what?
I couldn't live anymore pretending to be a guy.
Although right now this may not be the best example, but...
3 months ago, Abby started taking hormonal therapy to transition her to a female, the gender she identifies with.
Something interesting about estrogen. So for a long time, it was just a pill. It's very bad for the kidneys. So it is thought, that's why people would prefer injections. Now this one is a sublingual. It dissolves in the mouth.
Now I asked her a question.
Just one other comment. The part about the hormones, I told her not to put it in and not to film it. She did anyway.
That if she had been raised the gender she identifies with, which is female, she wouldn't have received the education that she did, allowing her to know 5 languages as well as now go to Columbia.
So definitely in my community as a woman, I wouldn't have gotten such a good Jewish education. However, I wouldn't have gotten a way better secular education.
Now, although her friends at Columbia have accepted her for who she is and who she identifies with, which is Abby Stein, her family has completely shunned her.
The only thing that I have from them is getting hate emails.
They send you hate emails?
I'm getting quite a few hate emails, but not that many. I was expecting more, but I'm getting quite a few hate emails.
Tamara, who used the term gender dysphoria?
She
Abby?
did.
Sorry for going to use this term. This guy's an asshole.
Dysphoria is a form of mental illness. It's a mental disorder. And I guess part of I'm hearing this story and I'm thinking 2 things. One, I feel like the whole story is just throwing the Hasidic Jewish community under the bus as they're anti-woman. They're this, and I think it ignores the thousands of years of history with Hasidic Jews steeped in tradition. And I've said this before, we've talked about transgender issues before, that there's this rush to celebrate becoming who you are and completely ignoring the fact that we have a serious problem of mental disorder in this country that doesn't seem to be addressed.
So often we've seen in these news stories that have come out, and what we hear about the community is that it is closed off and it doesn't give those options for women to become who they are, or for people to explore other options in life other than becoming a rabbi, which she would have had to do had she have stayed in this community.
Well, the sad thing to me is there's too little being done and talked about with things like gender dysphoria, which leads to other disorders, and I think that's a sad part it's not often discussed.
I think that, you know, if you...
The way I look at it was the guy signing off, hey, in case you don't know, we are Fox News.
Want to follow more of her? She's doing a blog, and you can see all of her experiences as she transitions.
Abby, were you in the room when you were talking with that?
No. Okay, let's keep all the craziness at bay for a second, and I want to show the other video. Then we can do a full analysis and take comments and talk about it.
I pretty much had an image in my mind that most people in the world are Jewish and most Jews are ultra-Orthodox. When I was 19 was the first time I got access to internet, and I was like, okay, I have to check. So I found the Hebrew Wikipedia page about trans people. I couldn't read English at that point. I was only able to read in Hebrew. My life was never the same after that. I'm Abby Stein. I was raised in the Hasidic community in Williamsburg, Brooklyn, New York. I identify as a woman of trans experience. The Hasidic community in Williamsburg is probably one of the most sheltered communities, definitely in the US, perhaps even in the world. Everything is different. I was raised without internet, TV, movies, Broadway shows, music, magazines. I couldn't have a conversation in English until I was 20. In the Hasidic community, men shave their head. I hated that I had to shave. I would have loved to have long hair. Now it's just as different as it gets, at least in terms of facial hair or anything like that. Growing up, I always identified more with the feminine part, with the females in my family, in my community. Every time that I tried to tell myself, it's not that you're a girl, it's something else is a problem, I would start battling with depression, and got to a point where I realized, hey, this is not a life, I have to do something. When I left the community I was raised in, I didn't know how to dress or how to talk to people, and I had to figure out everything from scratch. And in some ways, that's exactly what I'm doing now in terms of transition on the gender spectrum. People tell me a lot, oh, you're so brave, you're so strong, and I always feel like, I don't know, I only did what I have to do to survive. And if there's one thing that I could go back and tell myself when I was 6 years old, 12 years old, it's no, there are other people like you.
I think it's useless to point out that even ignoring the actual story, I think this is a lot, journalistically, it's a better piece. There's a lot more work in it, and they're trying to use my voice to narrate rather than having their own voice, which is another part that most journalists at least pretend to do, which is using the voice of the subject, using the voice of the person you interview. Yeah, well, let's get some comments, then I will go and talk a bit about my, yeah.
When I walked in, the session had just started. Okay. You were talking about the difference you had noted between coverage by print versus digital media. Can you expand on that? It's an area.
We're going to get to that in a minute. You're finishing up with digital, then I'm going to move on to print. We might not have enough time, and I'm thinking now I have another session later today. I might use that to do the music projector. Then I might just do the print part then. If they will allow me.
Could you just do the print part now and wait for the discussion for after?
It's not going to be an after because we're not going to have enough time. And a big part of what I want to do is I want to do the discussion also. So I will try to narrow it down and try to do some of the print part. But there's no way I'm going to do all of it anyway. So let me try. We'll try to take it. Yeah.
When you came out, when you got divorced, was before you came out. What was the reason for your divorce?
That's a great question.
After such a short time.
It was religion. It was the fact that I wasn't Hasidic anymore in observance, which is what forced me to divorce. She got remarried 2 months after that.
2 months?
Yeah.
Wow. Usually they have to get married.
Yeah.
Yeah. But the reason that you're estranged from your parents, is it because you left the Hasidic community or because of the transgender?
Because of the transition, the trans part. Yeah.
I was gonna make a comment on
Sure.
that.
Yeah. That's what I want. Go ahead.
I mean, it was very striking to me how much focus they put on like the makeup and
Which one?
The first
Fox
the
News?
first the Fox News one, and this kind of like two blonde women showing you how to put on makeup, and then at the end you have this man who's explaining to these two women, well, you should know also it's not just fun and makeup, but it's a mental disorder, and just all of just everything was wrong with that.
Okay. Let's keep the comments to observations on the clips, not just comments about the story. We can do that. We'll do that later. So just relating to the clips.
So just for the particular moment when the jerk starts talking, I was struck by like the pictures of the woman journalists' faces when they're like this, like they're unable to like express the like concerned feeling they have. Like, really, I'm stuck in this room with this guy. It was like I was actually in some sense like the fact that they showed that was one of the few good things I thought about it. Was that it could have, without saying much about it, you got at least some counter view.
And so to be honest also, there was another part. They did argue with him. The journalist told me after that they did argue with him and they filmed it, but then he insisted that they cut it out. So the two women, both of them, you can see on their faces as they're starting to make the faces, they're like, what's going on here? So they tried to argue with him after that, but he was not really ready to listen. Yeah.
Just a comment on the name Chasing News. Is there any evidence they actually found any?
Okay, now let me move on to my observations on them. So let me focus a bit on the journalists, and then we'll talk a bit about the networks also. So the first part, the Fox News one. The journalist was really nice. I'm going to give her that. She was actually really nice relatively. But she had little to no experience working on LGBT stories and very little understanding of Judaism. She lives, in New Jersey, somewhere in the middle of Jersey. Didn't know anything. Literally, I had to educate her on almost every part of what is Judaism, what is trans issues. She really didn't know anything. At the same time, I think she tried her best. But also, what is evident from the clip, she's trying to be as sensational as possible. With a part of putting in the part of the hormones that I told her not to. Saying that it's the first time I'm doing makeup, it wasn't. It was, I don't know, the 100th time almost. But she knew it. We discussed it. She decided to say it the first time. So there's definitely I would say she put the sensational part and having a great story way above having a real story. It's just a really good example. Next time anyone on Fox News says anything is fake news, you should know who is really fake. It's a personal experience, a personal story. Would actually lie. We'll get to that. I'm going to take a the commentary in the video, as I said, you just have to make sure everyone knows it's Fox News. CNN. So the network itself chose two journalists with a personal understanding of the story. One of them was a queer woman, and one of them was a Jewish woman. They came into the project with a very basic understanding. She was just a lesbian woman, but she is part of the LGBT community. She came really educated. She had read up a lot. She knew what's going on. The Jewish woman, she grew up in a conservative family, the other journalist, but again also came knowing quite a bit about the community. She has done a project before on the Orthodox community. She knew what was going on. They were a lot more interested in telling a story and not just make a sensational statement. And obviously the result is a clip that I would prefer, and sometimes I want to, like, when people ask me my story, whatever, and I want to send them a clip, I would rather send the CNN clip than I would ever send that. However, I want to show another video. And I want to compare both of these to a clip that was filmed and published by a good friend of mine. And her only mission was she wants to tell a story. She was still doing it for a network, Korea University News. It's in Montreal. But she focuses on a lot less sensational topics. I'm going to show it and we can decide on our own.
I had a great ancestor who lived about 250 years ago. His name was Israel ben Eliezer, known as the Baal Shem Tov, the founder of the Hasidic movement. And he said a very important statement. We are complex people, and you gotta accept people for who they are without knowing what that is exactly. You don't have to understand, and they don't have to prove to you and something in order for you to accept that.
Abby Stein lived in an ultra-Orthodox or Hasidic community in New York for almost her whole life. She grew up with 13 siblings, a Judaic education, no internet, and not knowing a word of English. She married at 18, had a son at 19, and by 20 she decided the Hasidic movement wasn't for her and left to pursue a proper education with the freedom to express her identity. Last September, Abby openly came out as transgender and told her father, who now no longer speaks to her.
I'm not expecting them to go take a course in gender identity and become all open-minded, but this is who I am. Just, you don't understand it, fine. I can try to explain it to you. How about that?
Abby learned English at 19 and cut her religious practices after leaving the community. She became involved with a program called Footsteps that helps those who leave the community get on their feet. It helped her get a diploma and adapt to the life in New York City.
People who leave the ultra-Orthodox community are immigrants in their own country. That's more than actual immigrants, because people don't give us the benefit of an immigrant, the benefit of the doubt in so many ways. They expect you to be cultured and everything, but you don't know English, but you don't know how to dress, how to walk, how to talk. It's in so many ways what trans people describe when they transition. People who just leave the community have it.
Besides the struggle of adapting to life in New York, Abby didn't find it a problem to live as her true identity.
I knew what I'm getting into, and I'm pretty good at it, ironically. I love makeup, I love shopping, I love culinary, I love manicures. I'm pretty good at it. I was really bad at being a guy, so at least I should be good at that. I was never successful, actually, and one of my last attempts at succeeding as a guy was I bought a clothing manual for how to dress as a guy.
Abby receives plenty of media attention since her profile in the New York Times from November. Her blog, which started after leaving the community to express her thoughts, now gets hundreds of thousands of views a day. Her bit of fame opens doors for her to speak about her journey at events, some reaching over 200 attendees.
When I talk to people and I talk about transition, about gender identity, one of my biggest goals that I want to talk about is raising awareness, getting people to be aware and know that, be open to the concept that people are more than just the truth that you see and just what you know about that.
Now a Columbia student, an educator, and rising activist, Abby is comfortable with herself and views the world with a new perspective.
In terms of personality, I think I changed a lot more the last 6 months than just from leaving the community. Just inherently, I don't know, everything just looks different. The world looks different. People seem to smile a lot more to me. Oh. I don't know. It just looks nicer. I don't know how to explain it.
Julia Maman, Concordia News, Montreal.
Okay. Does any comments you want to compare this to the other clips I can take? Otherwise, I will continue.
This one portrays you as a human being.
Good, really, really good point. Journalistically speaking, one of the biggest differences were the other two were networks. This, she maybe did it for a network, but her goal was, I met her in Montreal. I was doing a speaking tour there last year. Everything in here was filmed in Montreal. And she was just like, I want to do something about it. I want to make a clip of it, but you're going to tell me what you want to have in there. All the old pictures, for example, she ran it by me, can I use that? Is it okay if I use that? Is it okay if I said that? She was really interested in getting the story right, so to speak. Another interesting point that I had while experiencing filming this was both Fox and CNN both filmed quite a lot, although Fox News filmed the least amount of footage. With CNN, I filmed for a total of, I think, 6 hours for just like 3 minutes, which is common. People do that. And I've done it with other projects ever since. She, however, with the least resources, filmed the most. She was really determined for it. We filmed, as you can see probably on the clothes, at 3 different occasions, or 4 even, I don't remember. She was really determined to do something good. If I ever have to teach a class in journalism and tell people what's the most preferred way, looking from the lens of a subject or someone who has done it, do something like that. The CNN one, I get it. Still sensational, but they really tried, at least I would say they really tried to make me feel comfortable. They wanted to make sure it's people. Fox News, what?
Yeah. From very much from the outside perspective, I thought the last 2 were both, I thought, lovely things. I thought the CNN one did a really good job of quickly grabbing your attention, conveying the basic information very quickly, and it was, I think, one that I can see why in a world where you're trying to get in short snippets of information, and just the overall visual structure and craft of the media, the CNN, I mean, the amount of money poured into it.
Of course, they have resources, they have equipment, they have everything. It's a very
completely kind of seamless throughout.
Yeah.
Where
Definitely.
With lots of graphic art and just kind of
it's definitely a lot more professional, no questions there. Yeah.
I'm just curious, did you give Fox News some feedback? I mean, it's really upsetting that they...
I spoke with a journalist a bit, although she was really insisting that almost on every bad part she was like, oh, was the editor, was the guy who's I think the producer of the network.
But surely they're still accountable if you specifically ask them not to.
I mean, I could. If I really want to go on a crusade against Fox News now, I could use that, I could do that. I feel there's a lot of people doing that already. I'm probably going to just be labeled as a crying liberal, snowflake, blah, 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 blah. I don't have to tell you all of the discourse going on in the media. I choose my battles. I'm not going to...
Yeah, good on you.
I'm not sure, but I think you might have, when you started this, you had perhaps 2 ways of doing that. One of them is the way you did. The other one to be the quiet way, so that you will appear as a woman. Nobody will know anything about you. Give an insight.
So I definitely, again, I want to try to focus back on readers. I don't want to talk just about the story. There's definitely reasons. That was a kind of a conscious decision that I want to be public about it. Mostly it's because I was aware of a lot of people in the community who don't have support. A lot of people, just like me, who don't know even that trans people exist, and it was important for me to raise awareness on it. So yeah, that was a big part of it. Yeah, okay. Let me try to move on a bit, so we have 50 minutes left. I'm going to try to get a bit of the media part. So for that, I'm going to maybe go back to my browser and use it maybe online. I just want to give you a snippet of what I'm going to focus on what I call part 2, which is national news outlets. I want to focus on a total of 6 articles. The first ones will be 2 articles from the New York Times. One of them was published in November of 2015. An article that I was not interviewed for. They didn't interview me, they just went online, took some information from my blog, from information from a New York Post article even, which was the one that got the most attention the most traction at that point. In February 2016, which was one that profiled 3 trans women, including Yiska Smith, who is also here, and myself, 3 Jewish trans women. A very different kind of article, a very interesting approach, I think a fairly good one. I want to show some of it, which is actually a very little known network. Most people have never heard of them before. They're called Daily Dot. They do have a tabloidy side a bit, but at least the article that they did was a really good one. I really enjoyed working with journalists. I became close friends with her. I still am. She was really great. Then there's an article from the New York Magazine, which was published in December of 2015, which is totally written in my voice. It was an interview. I didn't write it, but they make it sound as if I did. There's benefits and problems to that. We'll get to that. A Huffington Post article, which is more like a report talking about what I call my bat mitzvah, name change ceremony at Remimu in June of 2016. So that was kind of a report on that, so to speak. And the last one that I want to show from the National Media Network is an NBC NBC Out is called, an NBC news article that was just published a month ago, January 2017. Points of interest that I want to try to point out, and while it's on the screen, I will let it stay for a second, every article, so people could see for themselves. One of the interesting, so I haven't had any article that would insist on using now, like all pronouns. I wouldn't talk to them. There might have been some that didn't interview me and did it anyway. I don't know. I wouldn't talk to them. So everyone currently uses she/her pronouns, but pre-transition pronouns. That's something that's some articles it's attention, some have no problem with it. Just for context, most guide manuals for journalists published by such as GLAAD, which is an LGBT media awareness group, published by the New York Times manual of style, the Wikipedia manual of style, all of these require to use pronouns that a person uses now when talking about their entire life. On Wikipedia, for example, if any of you have ever edited a Wikipedia page, I've seen it first on Jennifer Boylan, which is a trans woman on her wiki page. There will be sometimes at the beginning of the page, when you look on the code, the HTML code, they will say, per Wikipedia manual style, you should use the current pronouns for the entire life. The story versus the headline, and this is a twofold part. It's sometimes they just use a headline that's totally blown out of proportion. Another very important detail, which is something that I learned in journalism in general, and I think it's important for all of us to know when we read articles. Most articles that are published by major networks, the journalists don't write the headline. The headline is usually written by an editor or someone like that. So sometimes there could be a very, very different approach in the article compared to the headline. The use of pictures. Some wanted to use all pictures. In the first articles I offered all pictures, then I stopped offering. I'm like, I don't feel comfortable with that anymore. Some still went online and used some that are public source, some didn't. Use of names. Right now, everyone that asks me, I'm like, don't mention my old name at all. Some will still insist, the information is online, so I can't really stop them from doing it. Who are the journalists? I'm not going to mention that, but if you want to ask, you can ask me about it, and I can talk a bit about who the journalists were, and I like to keep in touch with most of them. I think it's an important networking tool. They all had they all coming from different stories, different backgrounds, and based on that affects a lot. When you read any news piece, who the journalist is and what their background and relationship with the story is, has a tremendous effect on the story. And interview structure. So as I mentioned before, all of these articles had different structures. Like the first New York Times didn't interview me at all. The second one was a sit-down interview. Daily Dot was an in-person sit-down interview. The New York Magazine was a phone interview. So was Washington Post and NBC News. So like there's slight differences that you can see which quotes they use, which language they use based on the interview structure. Let me go online. So if any of you, whatever we don't get to, this is my website called The Second Transition. If you just put in my name, this is the first thing that comes up, and there's a media tab on there. So depending how quick the internet will be, how quick it takes to load, and I will show these. So the New York Times. I'm going to open both at once. This is the article. So both of the articles were posted under the subsection called Women in the World, some of you might have heard, which is not just a section, they are actually an organization, which is now run by the New York Times. So a lot of articles that relate to women, or the way they put it, will be under that. So this first article is an article that they didn't interview me. And as you can see, I don't know what that means, but it says it was made by Women of the World staff, whoever that is. I have no idea. Okay. The picture that I used is a picture that I posted on my blog, my coming out post. So they start out with literally the first words are my old nickname, and they use he pronouns when they talk pre-transition. And then they switch into she pronouns, and as you can see, they put a link to the New York Post, which was the most widely shared article at that point. The quotes that they have, this quote, the one quote that they have in there, my main goal, they took from my blog. So it's not like a quote that I told them in person, they just went online and took it out. For a minute, if anyone wants to, there's not enough time to just read through it, but it's just a few points that I want to Okay, this is the other article, which was written a lot. It wasn't written as much as a profile. It was written more like a news article. And the journalist herself, Bridget Platz, I understand you know her. She grew up Orthodox, lives in Upper West Side. Really, really amazing, an amazing woman. I had a great time getting to know her, and I have a great time being here. We're just friends now, and we chat on Facebook. She's really amazing. She works for the New York Times as a staff writer. But she's Jewish, and she grew up Orthodox, so that's a big,
Yeah,
you know it?
No, it's just saying that subtitle was something that was not even an issue before. Nobody, and everything said, so how are you about your Judaism now? What does this mean for Judaism?
Yeah.
Just about.
So she's Jewish, observant to some extent, so she obviously had a lot. Another thing that they did, which is also something that to me tells a lot about a journalist from my experience, they sent a photographer. They wanted to get their own pictures. They took the pictures on Columbia's campus. This picture actually, while this one seems photoshopped, it's not. It doesn't even use a filter. She showed me the picture after she took it, and that's exactly how it looked. She got a really good rating, which is important because I've had journalists photoshopping pictures and making it really, really good. So this article uses she/her pronouns throughout the entire story. They do mention my old name. They do have a few interesting sentences that are kind of, which I like to some extent. I can try to find it, but at some point it says, at age 20 she became a father, which I think is a really interesting statement to make. I've had it in an article that was just published from Arts last week. They also said that she was her parents' first son. So it's interesting. It's something that is obviously in tension at times, and people have to work with it.
Well, what would you rather them?
No. I like statements like that. I'm totally cool with statements like that. She started out with a story, which is fairly cool. Yeah, I think this is pretty much all my comments that I have on this. We started with a few other pictures. So it was divided into a few parts. I did like a short kind of 3 profiles.
What year did she do this?
Huh?
What year did she do
this? This was in spring, I think, of spring of 2015. 2016, sorry. February, actually, exactly. Okay. These are the 2 New York Times articles. Let me show a few more, the other ones that I mentioned, then we'll get to conversations. New York Post. I'm probably not going to get to that. Maybe I will do it in the afternoon in my other session. There's another, I want to talk a lot about the way tabloids talk about it, and there's a New York Post article, there's a Mail article. I have a lot to brag about that, but maybe we'll get to that another time. This is the New York Magazine article. So the New York Magazine has every year, the end of the year, they, I think it was 50 reasons to love New York, something like that. Reasons to love New York, and they publish different profiles. So this, as you can see in the byline, it's Stein is told to Jim Murphy. He pretends to use my voice. It's not exactly my voice. A lot of things is kind of his voice putting on me. This picture I gave him, he didn't take any pictures. The focus of this article was a bit on New York, although not as much as he told me it's going to be. I'm fairly certain to use the pronouns she throughout the time because it's narrated as if it's in my voice. Yeah, it tells different stories. Again, I would love to go through all of them and read them more, but we have 4 minutes left, so sorry. New York Magazine, let's find the Daily Dot article. It's a really good one, and NBC. Oh, I haven't, it's not on my web. This is the Daily Dot. Really interesting, because they're a bit independent, I guess the journalists also have more freedom. The journalist herself is, she is queer, she identifies as queer, and she is Jewish, although not religious at all, but she did have quite a bit of knowledge. They decided to do this, which is one of their staff did like a drawing, it's kind of like, I think it was cool. she has an interesting start opening line, which no one else used, although this is a story which I've told to a lot of people. In 2012, some of you might have heard of it, there was a gathering at Citi Field Stadium of 70,000 Hasidic Jews. The point of the gathering was ban the internet. I just find this really crazy that people gathered in New York City in 2012 at a stadium and their goal is we're going to ban the internet. It's, whatever. She started out with that part, which is an interesting story.
That was a fact? They did it?
Yeah, that happened in 2012. Yeah, you can find the clips online. Yeah. She, this article specifically, while you can always see, like, she obviously, she points out about Shem Tov, she did get all the details right. She was very precise with details. I would love to see every journalist being as, like, she did mention Satmar, she's one of the only ones who got it right, Dynasty, and trying to get every detail right. She also uses she, her pronouns throughout the entire article. It's a great job. It's like what I love. Like here, this is a snapshot, a snap of my blog. And yeah, she did a great job. Now let me just do the final one is an NBC Out article, which was just published a few weeks ago. They have something NBC Out, and they profile different people every week. This picture was actually taken by a friend in Columbia, who is a professional photographer. This is one of my actually favorite articles. The part that I don't like a bit is that it was done over the phone, and I found that interviews that are done over the phone are a lot less precise and a lot less accurate than ones done in person. But again, she does, I think it was a great job. Fairly certain she's using she, her pronouns throughout the entire article. Before we continue, before I take some questions, we can go over with 5 minutes. Time is up, so if anyone is going to leave now, don't worry, I'm not going to get insulted. I just want to mention two other, just because of the Jewish audience, and I was hoping to show it online, but I don't have the time for that. With most networks, I didn't really have an issue with the pronouns. Most of them were okay, most of them, if I asked them to correct something, they did. Only two that I did, shockingly, were Jewish newspapers. The one of them, and I need to show that article. I had to go with them, like literally almost threaten them to like make a scene out of it, make a situation out of it to get them to change it. Find it. I'm not sure if it's this one. It's the right network, but I'm not sure if the article is a good one. Is the right one? No, it's not. This is just an article that they did. So one of the networks that I had the hardest time with is J Weekly. It's a Bay Area Jewish newspaper. And it's this one. They insisted on using he pronouns, using my birth name, and not just they insisted, I tried counseling them, getting them to change it, and the editors were no, you're not changing it. Finally, after going back for threatening them, they ended up using my last name. And at some point, as you can see in the article, it gets really, really ironic. This was, like in this paragraph, they mentioned my last name, the second paragraph, 3 times because they didn't want to use any pronouns. They insisted not to use she, her pronouns pre-transition, rather than not use pronouns, make a really botched article just to stuck up with it. It wasn't the journalist. The journalist, to her defense, she tried really to help me out. It was the editors, which are apparently still old-class Jewish. They're both two old Jewish men who refused to change. It bothered me a lot more the part that it's a Jewish network because I've up to that point had a really great experience. Then once they get to transition, they do use correct pronouns. It was not a bad article. They did insist, obviously, on using an old picture. Yeah.
Is it a religious?
J Weekly, not intentionally religious. They just Northern California. I don't even know that much about it. I was at the Bay Area doing a speaking tour. Hillel at Berkeley asked me if I wanted to do an interview with them. I was like, yeah. Then this is what they did. One other thing that I have, which was the most shocking, was an interview that I did the Haaretz article last week, which insisted also, which was shocking to me because the art is supposed to be progressive. The journalist did a really, really great job, and I'm going to say she is really amazing. One of the best articles that I have read with all the pronouns issue. The editors insisted on using a provocative title, which whatever, I gave up on. But pronouns and old name, they used a total of 10 times. Originally when they posted these a total of 10 times my old name. They removed it in the end. They changed certain parts, but the article is still going back and forth between pronouns. It was weird that someone at Haaretz insisted on that. I don't know exactly why. Yeah. Let's go there. Yeah.
Abby, what's your biggest hope with all this media coverage? What's it going to result in?
I always say if I can tell one 12-year-old child in the Hasidic community who's struggling that they would hear about it and know there's other people like that, that's enough. I've already accomplished that, I know for a fact. So now it goes to its next stages. It's changing the dialogue and getting, it's the first step towards acceptance is raising awareness and getting people to talk about it. I would be really naive to say that I hope that in 10 years you could just be trans in a Hasidic community. That would be a lie, that's not going to happen. I do think that with enough talk about it, with enough people coming out, there's a possibility that in 10 years, if someone transitions in the Hasidic community, they wouldn't be shunned by their family. That is a possibility, which I really hope to. Yeah. I want to try to get people who have left.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Sorry, we're literally out of time. So yeah.
The first of the Times articles, somebody who worked for the Times for many years had me in complete shock. Was this digital or did it appear in print?
Wait, this one?
The first of them. The one where they never spoke with you.
Yeah. I have no idea.
Oh.
I have no idea if it was in print. It's totally possible. I literally have no idea.
Think not. It is so utterly against any Times standards as to do.
I didn't make it up.
There's a difference, granted, between digital and the need for fresh content instantly, no matter how accurate it is or isn't. But the print version, if that were in print.
I don't think they would. I don't think they even would publish this
and
because
to reference the
New York Post. Yeah, so
it's not.
I don't think it was. I don't want to say for sure, but most likely it wasn't in print. Yeah.
That's just not the Times.
What do you have to do after Columbia?
So I'm doing, I hope to do an MPA, Master of Public Affairs. I'm really interested in public policy. I already am doing public policy work in New York already. I'm going to work on a city council campaign over the summer for a campaign that hasn't been announced yet, so I can't really say who. Yeah, and my goal is public policy community. I want to continue to do Jewish education. Specifically, I want to move a bit more into adult education, like the tech study, for example, that I did yesterday. I would love to do more of that. I'm doing, but not as much as I would love. So yeah, there's forward to that. Yeah. Oh, hi.
I just wanted to say thank you. You're courageous, wonderful, and it's so great to have you come present at Limmud New York.
I can continue to go. Our time is up, but I can continue to go until the next session comes in. So if anyone wants to ask more questions.